Then why all of this deception?
Because lying is a skill like any other, and if you want to maintain a level of excellence, you have to practice constantly.
Practice on someone else.
Hey there, interwebs, and welcome back to Original Facts. For those unfamiliar with this series, everything you're about to hear is a fact, factlet, or factoid, but some of them I've just made up. In the previous volume, I told you pyritized ammonite fossils inspired the Greek legend of the Golden Fleece, owing to their resemblance to golden ram's horns, but things don't stop there. In English, the only difference between the words cold and gold is whether or not the leading consonant is voiced. Their ancient Greek translations, kruos and krusos, are likewise similar, differing principally by the sibilant sound in the middle, and the ancient Greek word for ram is krios, changing only the first vowel. That's why, in my homebrew D&D setting, Golden Fleece, or Chrysomalos, is acquired from the ram-headed cryosphinx, which has cryogenic ice breath in contrast to fire-breathing dragons. I think this is a terribly clever pun, but you may say it's all Greek to me. So how about Latin? The Latin word for gold is aurum, and the aureum was an ancient Roman gold coin. The later coin, known as the gold mark, was named after Marcus Aurelius, whose face was stamped on coins of the realm, and the last of the so-called 5 good emperors responsible for a period in Roman/Romano-British history known as Pax Romana and marked by relative peace and prosperity. You may have heard that the caesarean section is named after Julius Caesar, who was the first baby delivered by this method, but this is untrue. Such a procedure would have been fatal to the mother at the time, and historical records tell that JC's mom, Aurelia, lived for another 45 years after his birth. The C-section is actually named after him because he received an involuntary one on the Senate floor in 44 BC. Happy belated Ides of March, by the way. Another Roman general turned statesman was Scipio Africanus, along with his closely related cousin, Scipio Afarensis. The Emperor Caligula's name was actually a nickname meaning little boots, formed by attaching the diminutive suffix "ulus" to the feminine word for boot, caliga. Likewise, Dracula means little she-dragon. The refreshingly adequate Roman Emperor Claudius introduced 3 new letters to the Latin alphabet: the half-H, the digamma inverted, and the anti-sigma. Don't let the male hierarchists or Omegaverse people find out about that last one. They were, probably, pronounced as I, W, and PS, respectively. When he wasn't inventing new letters, Claudius also once personally battled an orca which had become trapped in the harbor of Ostia. This was essentially a PR stunt done for the benefit of spectators, but he wasn't the last celebrity to grapple with a killer whale. Brian Blessed also wrestled one as a little side quest when he was in America's Pacific Northwest on an expedition to find Sasquatch. His academic fascination with Bigfoot and Yetis also brought him to the Himalayan mountains in Tibet, where he boxed a few rounds with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Also mentioned in Volume 4, extremophiles are organisms which thrive in conditions so extreme they're generally considered prohibitive to normal life. Acidophiles flourish in acidic solutions, hyperthermophiles display optimal growth at temperatures above 80 degrees Celsius, and hibernophiles thrive in Ireland. I can now add toxophily to the lexicon as well, and this refers to a love of archery. In fact, the word toxic comes via French and Latin from Greek. The ancient Greek phrase toxikon pharmakon meant poison for use on arrows, but over time the word pharmakon, meaning poison, was dropped from usage, and the ancient Greek word for arrow eventually became the Latin, French, and English word for poison. Go figure. Ancient Greek, I should add, was not a unified language. It was a wide array of dialects, some of which could be quite diverse. The Laconic dialect spoken in Sparta, for example, used the ancient Persian loanword shakast, meaning defeat, loss, or failure. That's right, losing literally wasn't a word in Spartan vocabulary. Sparta also had a military position similar to admiral called navarch, roughly meaning commander of ships, which is slightly ironic when you consider the phrase Spartan Navy is on par with military intelligence and jumbo shrimp. Still, it's not as ridiculous as the title of Nebraska Admiral. For those who don't know, Nebraska has no coastline, major lakes, or navigable waterways apart from the Missouri River, which forms its eastern border. Its most noteworthy intrastate body of water is the Platte River, described by natives as a mile wide and an inch deep. In fact, Nebraska is the only U.S. state which is triply landlocked, meaning one must pass through not 1, not 2, but 3 other states, or 2 states in Canada, to reach an ocean. In spite of all this, Nebraska Admiral is the state's highest civic honor and has been bestowed upon foreign heads of state such as Queen Elizabeth II, Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, and Gambian President Yahya Jammeh, U.S. presidents like FDR, Harry Truman, and Nebraska-born Gerald Ford, athletes like Mark Spitz, Dr. J. Irving, and Arnold Palmer, and even actors like Bob Hope, Bill Murray, and Ronald Reagan. Speaking of useless titles, just as a navarch commands the navy, an elephantarch commands the elephantry, which is like infantry or cavalry, but with war elephants. This position was originally created by Alexander the Great for the forces guarding his palace at Babylon, but it has seen more recent ceremonial use in America. During the Civil War, King Mongkut of Siam offered Abraham Lincoln a gift of elephants to help out with the war effort. Lincoln politely but wisely declined for logistical reasons, but he held on to the title of Elephantarch because a lofty title which is impressive on paper but meaningless in practice is a useful tool for getting rid of political enemies and underperforming officers without overtly insulting them. In theory, being promoted to Elephantarch is like being promoted to admiral, the only difference being that while the US military has boats, it doesn't have any elephants. Being offered this promotion is a damned if you do, damned if you don't choice. Accepting it means losing your current position where you can actually do things, but turning it down could negatively impact your chances of being offered other promotions in the future, ones which are presumably more useful. It was, in essence, the white elephant gift of military promotions, except, quite critically, without any elephants. On the subject of animals, I like how there's a personality stereotype for pretty much every anthropomorphized marine animal. Sharks are all hunters, walruses are curmudgeonly gluttons, crabs are penny-pinching old men, and octopuses are drunks. Okay, that last one is more of a trope in East Asian media, but you can see where it comes from. They're all floppy, with seemingly unfocused eyes and limbs flailing in different directions, and when moving across dry land, they even ooze across the ground like a 3 a.m. drunk trying to find the way home. Additionally, an octopus's octet of limbs is technically classified as 8 arms, so this lad is completely legless. For about 2 months in the mid-1930s, guinea pig was an ethnic slur against Italian Americans until someone remembered that it's also the name of a cute South American rodent, compared jungle bunny. Another name for the capybara is guinea big. The extinct diodon was up to 3.5 meters, or 12 freedom units, long and as tall as me, an average American male, at the shoulder, which is why it's also known as the hell pig, hogzilla, or bigus pigus. Meanwhile, a juvenile axolotl is called an axolotl, and although you might reasonably believe that the term for a juvenile ocelot is likewise ocelotl, it's actually not a lot. A baby owl is an owlet until it gets wet, at which point it becomes a moist owlet. The diminutive term for a young, or just small, alpaca is an alpacino, and, fun fact, one of those diminutives I just said wasn't a lie. Most people would identify this bird as a peacock, and they'd be right, because this is a male of the species. In the past, I've convinced more than one child that Easter eggs are laid by peacocks, which is nonsense on 2 different levels, but a fun lie to tell anyway. Try it on your own this Sunday. Many people don't really consider it, but peacock is a gendered term. The species as a whole consists of peacocks and she-cocks. Likewise, a female cockroach is called a henroach. Mountain lions are more closely related to house cats than they are to African lions. The elephant shrew is more closely related to elephants than shrews, and kangaroo rats are more closely related to kangaroos than rats, while rats are more closely related to fish than ratfish are. Likewise, spider crabs are more closely related to spiders than they are to crabs, as are horseshoe crabs. Thanks, carcinization. Whenever I pass a wake of vultures, I tip my hat and thank them for their service. By acting as nature's cleanup crew, they dispose of rotting carcasses that harbor diseases like botulism, anthrax, and rabies, which would otherwise spread to other local species like dogs, foxes, and rats. Wake is one of the collective nouns for a group of vultures, by the way, but only when they're on the ground having a nosh. When they're on the wing, you have a kettle of vultures. You can also have an unkindness of ravens, a parliament of owls, a pandemonium of parrots, a pride of peafowl, a flamboyance of flamingos, a hearth of phoenixes, a murmuration of starlings, a murder of crows, a manslaughter of martins, and a mischief of magpies. In general, though, birds come in flocks, while herbivores like cows and goats come in herds, and carnivores like wolves and hyenas come in packs. One notable exception is camels, which come in packs, of 20. It's not zoology, but a group of black holes is known as a cluster or a swarm, and it can also be called a singularity if they get too close together. In addition to magpies, a mischief could also be a group of rats, also known as a wealth of rats, as mentioned in Volume 2. Other unusual collective nouns include a tower of giraffes, a panoply of pangolins, a cornucopia of slugs, a caprice of goats, a nabby of monk seals, a skulk of foxes, a crash of rhinos, a smack of jellyfish, or if they're box jellies, a warehouse, a constellation or a galaxy of starfish, a cancer ward of crabs, a ton of whale, and a holy shit that's a lot of krill. An uncommon name for a bed of sea urchins is a meth lab, because prior to the 1970s, flower urchins were regularly harvested off the California coastline for the manufacture of pseudoepinephrine, the generic name of Sudafed, from one of the chemical compounds in their venom, or petitoxin, and so a large amount of mid-20th century bathtub meth was made, partially, from sea urchins. This also means that Grandpappy's vintage meth wasn't vegan. The plural of octopus, meanwhile, is a contentious subject, so much so that I've already made an entire video about it, but it doesn't have to be a complicated one. Much like how the plural of fish can be fishes or simply fish, the plural of octopus is also fish. I joke, but an archaic name for the octopus is devilfish, so you could presumably dodge the debate by using this older terminology if you really wanted to. Speaking of diabolical fish, early drafts of 1975 seminal summer blockbuster Jaws made the shark a speaking character to be voiced by none other than perennial villain Christopher Lee. As awesome as this could have been, it was primarily intended as a marketing gimmick so they could advertise Bruce Lee on the posters. This plan was tragically nixed by the Hong Kong martial artist's early demise. A movie monster which Christopher Lee did get to play was Frankenstein's creation in the first of Hammer's Frankenstein series. Of course, most people these days tend to associate the creation with Boris Karloff in the Universal films, but Lon Chaney Jr., Bela Lugosi, and Glenn Strange also donned the neck bolts for Universal. In the shooting scripts for both the original Frankenstein and its immediate sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, the only two Frankenstein films directed for Universal by James Whale, neither Frankenstein nor his creation survived to the end credits. In the finished films, however, both characters survive each time. Lightning gave him life, but sequels ensured he hung on to it. On the subject of movie monsters, it's well known that Pokémon is a portmanteau of pocket monsters, and so monsters of cinema like Gillman and Godzilla, both debuting in 1954, can be called Cinnamon. And what do the Wolfman and the 13th US president have in common? Their forenames are their mother's maiden names. President Fillmore's mother was Phoebe Millard, and Lon Chaney Jr.'s given name was Creighton Tull Chaney, named for his mother Clava Creighton. The surname of German silent film writer, actor, director Paul Wegener of Der Golem fame is likely related to Wagner, as both were historically occupational surnames for wagon makers. Likewise, Wagenburg was a hub, no pun intended, of wagon manufacture in 12th century Bavaria. It also lent its name to a kind of plant starch-based sandwich called a Veganburger, which eventually mutated in English to Veggie Burger. The grave marker of actor Elmore Rule Torn Jr., better known by his stage name Rip Torn, reads Rip Torn. If you've ever seen a tombstone, or better yet, a drawing of one, you know the abbreviation RIP. I'd also wager you've been told it stands for Rest in Peace, but this isn't true, strictly speaking. It actually stands for Requiescat in Pace, which is Latin for May he rest in peace. Likewise, the abbreviation IOU doesn't stand for IOU. Rather, it is short for Indebio offer unusquid, Latin for I must offer something, essentially saying I have to give you something, i.e. this note, as payment until I can get real payment together. The letters in SOS, meanwhile, don't stand for anything. Although there are claims of it standing for Save Our Ship or Save Our Souls, these are both essentially backronyms, phrases created to fit a pre-chosen abbreviation. The letters S and O were chosen because their Morse code representations are 3 dots and 3 dashes, respectively, making SOS, and thus very easy to remember, which is what you want when the ship's going down and everyone's in a panic. Another abbreviation is the Vulcan salute. Kinda. Shalom is the Hebrew word for peace, and it's the Jewish version of aloha, functioning as both a greeting and a farewell. When Leonard Nimoy had to come up with a suitably alien greeting for the Star Trek episode Amok Time, he turned to his Jewish heritage for inspiration. This hand symbol in Judaism is Shin, the first letter of Shalom. Thus, the Vulcan salute is rather similar to hippies flashing the peace sign to say hello and goodbye. Leaving a party without saying goodbye is a fairly global human behavior, but everywhere has their own name for it. In America, we call it an Irish goodbye. In England, it's the French exit, while in France they call it leaving the English way. It's leaving Polish style auf Deutsch, and the Dutch say taking the rat taxi. Speaking of goodbyes, I should probably say my own now. I have more original facts, but if I finished this script, the video would be over half an hour long, so I'm calling it quits here. Come back next month to hear the rest of them, and until then, thanks for watching, and have a nice day.
What I want to know is, out of all the stories you told me, which ones were true and which ones weren't?
My dear doctor, they're all true.
Even the lies.
Especially the lies.